Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in linguistics. I'm Pramod Pandey, Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. In the present module, we begin the discussion of multilinear phonology. The module that begins the discussion is entitled Autosegmental phonology. So this module is actually an introduction to autosegmental phonology. Let's begin. There have been two main contributions to phonological theory in the past 7 decades. One of them was the introduction of distinctive features to represent segmental speech sounds. As we have seen in great detail, how the use of distinctive features characterize not only individual segments, but also groups of segments that were called natural classes, how the use of distinctive features could lead to simplified rules and thus simplified grammars, how rules could be used to show natural connection between a linguistic process and an effect, or the cause and effect, the trigger and the consequence. Distinctive features have been of great value, and they continue to occupy the interest of phonologists today. Not only are distinctive features found useful in phonology, but actually the idea of distinctive features has been extended to other domains as well. Now, the second great contribution to phonological theory is the idea of multilinearity. What do we mean by multilinearity? Because of reference to it so many times in the past modules, you will be able to tell what multilinearity is. Essentially, it says that not only are phonological units arranged linearly, but they are also arranged multilinearly. In fact, multilinearity is the norm. The starting of the multilinear representations of in phonology was the idea of the introduction to stress and tone. And we have seen this repeatedly in the past few modules, how the attempt to explain the phenomena of stress and tone has shown these rules to be quite unnatural types, apart from being very complex in nature. So they gave you a reason to think of some alternative to account for the processes. So you have been following the root of phonological rules, and you wonder if there is something else that seems to be looked into. That's how the investigation into the representation of phonological forms started. The multilinearity that we are talking about is of two kinds. One we call constituent multilinearity, and the other is known as multiplanar multilinearity. What is constituent multilinearity? It's very much like the constituent structure of sentences in syntax, with which you will be very familiar. What the constituent structure multilinearity in phonology says is that there are prosodic units which are related to each other in terms of constituent structure. Now, let's take a look at a word such as differ. The first syllable is stressed, so you say that the word differ has two parts to it, two syllables. One is D and the other is fer. Now, this was helpful, as in syntax in the 50s, The labeling was found to be necessary to disambiguate structures. So in phonology as well, the constituent structure was complemented with labeling. And thus, simply by showing the constituent structure of a word such as differ, you could explain why the word differ has stress on the first syllable. And this way of representing sounds also helped us to see the difference between, let us say, the pair differ and defer. Now, defer has the second syllable stressed. There were many consequences of this way of representing sounds. We begin with trying to do away with certain diacritic features like equals, boundary, we called it. Earlier, all these Latinate prefixes were separated from these stems by means of a new kind of boundary in order to explain the difference between words such stress patterns of defer and differ. Now, it could be done simply in terms of showing the constituent structure to be the same in differ and defer, but the labeling was different. Now, this way, the constituent structure representation of words and phonological units continued. You can take a look at a sentence such as, John went home. Now, John went home has 3 degrees of stress. The strongest is on the last word, and then the next is on John, and the weakest stress is on went or came. Now, when we look at these sentence like this, the difference in these degrees of stress in a structure like this can also be explicated, shown explicitly to be on account of constituent structure, as you will see on the screen. So the way to represent it is that the strongest syllable is a kind of a syllable which has 2 branches, and the weak one has a single branch, and thus this way of representing these strong and weak syllables can easily explicate the stress in sentences or in phrases. Now, there is more to constituent structure, multilinearity, that we need to go into. Take a look at modules later on where we go into the details of the metrical structural analysis of words, of sentences and prosodic entities as part of prosodic phonology. Now we move on to the other type of multilinearity with which we are concerned in this module, namely multiplanar multilinearity. What does this mean? What this means is that not only that you have segments organized in a linear fashion at a certain level, but you also have more than one level of organization of phonological units. So you have the, let us say, in a simplified form, you have the segments organized at their level. Let's say vowels, consonants at one level. Then you have a tonal tier. That was the starting point of multiplanar multilinearity, as we explained in one of the past modules. So you have the tier of tone, and then you have the tier of segments. What happens at one level does not affect the tier at the other level. Now, that's how these were called autosegmental tiers. And that's how autosegmental phonology was born. The notion of autosegments, although stated in this form, appears to be new, a contribution, but the idea has been there in phonological theory, in the structural American approach to phonology, especially in the notion of long components by the American structuralist linguist Selig Harris, and the notion of these components in the British school of structural linguistics led by John Firth. Now, they also thought of these multiple levels of phonological representation. But there is a slight difference between them. The difference is that there is no systematic way in which these levels can be shown to be associated with one another. How these levels are connected and form a unified whole. What happens to these various levels at the time of the production of speech? Now, when autosegmental theory was first proposed by John Goldsmith, all these aspects of phonological representation on multilinear planes were thought of, and thus an explicit theory of autosegmental phonology was proposed. So, the introduction of autosegmental phonology to phonological theory has had multiple significant consequences. One of them was that the nature of phonological rules came to be added with another kind of rule. Now, what is the standard form of phonological rule? Let's take a look at some of these rules on the screen. For example, we have these rules. A voiced obstruent is devoiced at the end of words. A vowel is deleted following another vowel. And the third rule, a palatal glide y or a labial velar glide w is inserted between any vowel and a non-low front or back vowel respectively. Now, what do we find here if you take a look at this structure of these the phonological rules stated in the form of standard phonology? What we find is that every rule has a phonological focus, and then the focus relates to a change. There's a rewrite rule showing how the focus changes, and then there's environment. You are given with some environments. So every rule has three parts: a focus, a change, and an environment. The environment may be either preceding environment context or the right context or both contexts. So every phonological rule has to be this. If there is no context, then you know what kind of rule it is. It is a context-free rule, normally not permitted. It's also called neutralization rule. These are of have had great controversies, whether grammars have context-free rules or not is something that is to be debated. By and large, we assume that synchronic phonological grammars don't have constituent-free rules. So they're all context-sensitive. Now, in addition to the three parts, there can be a fourth part of a phonological rule, namely conditions. The conditions can be of this kind. Let's say the rule applies only to words of a certain lexical category, such as nouns or verbs, or it can apply only to native vocabulary, not to borrowed vocabulary. In some of the Dravidian languages, such as Malayalam, for example, the phonologies of native Dravidian vocabulary and of borrowed vocabulary from Sanskrit may be different. So we can have a condition saying that this applies only to words of a certain origin. But this is the standard form of linear rules in standard generative phonology. Now, autosegmental phonology has changed the way in which phonological segments, phonological units are represented. Take a look at the screen. What do you see on the screen? You notice two representations of two tiers. One is the tone tier, tonal tier, and the other is the vowel tier. The vowel tier, the tonal tier is associated with the vowel tier. One tone and then three vowels, all of them have the same tone. Now, there are two types of lines there. There is a solid line and there are these dashed lines. Now, there is a difference between them. The solid line is underlying association in the lexical items, and the dashed lines are reassociations. In addition to this, we also have a certain line with a cut there, equals boundary, showing that the relation between the tone and the vowel tier has been dissociated. And then the dotted line or the dashed line shows that there is reassociation. So there are multiple things, multiple ways of showing the association between the autosegmental units of, let's say, in this case, tones and vowels. The rules of autosegmental phonology, thus, are also such that they are dependent on association lines, association rules, and have been found to be very insightful. The autosegmental phonological approach to the explication of phenomena such as tone was such that it was found to be applicable to many other phenomena. The logical basis was that this way of representing sounds could not be confined only to the representation of tones. That is, it's not just the tonal changes which was found to be explicable using the autosegmental framework. If this was truly a significant way of accounting for a linguistic phenomenon, then this way should be available for other linguistic phenomena as well. And that's the logic. Slowly, autosegmental framework came to include in it several other phenomena using the same mechanisms. So the basic mechanism of autosegmental phonology, the basic devices rather of autosegmental phonology remained constant, but they were found to apply to other phonological processes as well. The most important, or rather the first ones that came to be included within the approach of autosegmental phonology were these phenomena, spreading phenomena, such as nasalization or vowel harmony, as we will see in a following module. Now, the logic is this: it came to be seen that a phenomenon such as nasalization normally takes place in the context of a preceding or following nasal. So when we say something like not, then o is nasalized because of a n there. Now, or on, so o is nasalized because of a nasal following it. Now, that means that the nasalization of a vowel actually is dependent on a nasal consonant. Now, suppose you assume we take the feature out of all the distinctive features and say that this feature is represented at another tier, such as plus nasal distinctive feature, and show that this plus nasal distinctive feature is solidly associated with a with a consonant, and then we can show how the feature spreads on to the vowels, neighboring vowels. This is especially helpful if the association is bidirectional or if the association takes place on more than one segment. In some languages, it can involve semi-vowels, all the vowels up to quite some distance, as we will see later. So nasalization was something that was found to be very insightful, explicable using autosegmental phonological framework. And another spreading phenomena was vowel harmony. Just as nasalization involves spreading, so vowel harmony too involves spreading. It is normally found that in most languages where you have either the frontness harmony or the backness harmony or the height harmony, we find that a vowel in the suffix or prefix takes the same features as of the stem. And so it is the stem which is shown to have a certain feature as an autosegment. And that feature will now spread on, can be shown with the help of dotted lines to spread on to other neighboring segments that are relevant to vowel harmony, so the vowels. Now, what we find is that there is hardly any phenomenon within the area of vowel harmony which cannot be explained insightfully by using autosegmental phonology. The earlier treatment of vowel harmony had to be extremely, shall we say, ad hoc. There was no way in which you could explain how is it that a change takes place or involves contexts which are far removed from the focus. Now, which came to question the relationship between the change and the context. How long can the context be? When we look at autosegmental phonological way of explaining phenomena, then there is no such issue arising that the autosegments are at different levels and they are associated within the formalism that is provided by autosegmental phonology. Now, going by the representation of the spreading phenomena, you will have noticed that already there is some kind of a recognition that segments such as C's or consonants and segments such as V's or vowels are already independent of the features, for example, plus nasal or plus high or minus back and so on and so forth, which are put at different autosegmental levels. So now this has had consequences on a new sub-theory of phonology called CV phonology. The CV phonological theory assumes that there is an independent tier of consonants and vowels, and the CV tier can help explain various phenomena such as the distinction between a single vowel and a diphthong, the distinction between, let us say, a long vowel and I, or a short vowel and a long vowel a, or the distinction between an affricate such as ch and a plosive such as t, whereas ch is a single consonant with two bifurcating association lines. T is a single consonant with only one association line, and this was also used for talking about syllable structures in different languages, what kind of onsets and what kind of codas were permitted in languages, in various phonologies. We have a fulsome theory then of CV phonology, which was influenced by autosegmental phonology. There are two further extensions of the autosegmental phonological way of describing phenomena. These deal with the phenomenon of stress on the one hand, and the phenomenon of assimilation on the other. Now, regarding stress, when you find that phonological entities are hierarchically ordered, such as the syllable, and then you have the word, phonological word, and the syllable, the foot, the word, etc. And then it is quite possible for us to conceive of them as independent tiers. So the metrical phonological theory that began as a constituent structure theory in Hayes 1981 developed into something like what is come to be called metrical grid theory. So there are levels of different grids of syllable and foot and word and so on. And that seems to have really led to a simplification of the theoretical framework of metrical theory to the analysis of prosodic phenomena such as word stress, phrasal stress, sentence stress. The other phenomenon where we have had a real significant change in accounting for the native speakers' knowledge of them is the phenomenon of assimilation in general. That is, the segments which are neighboring can affect each other, can take features from each other, and either as completely or partially, or in terms of a single feature, such as voice sounds become voiceless, or voiceless sounds become voiced, etc. Now, all these phenomena of assimilation has come to be seen as explainable using the notion of autosegmental representation of distinctive features. It has come to be called feature geometry by Clemens and other associates. So feature geometry also depends on the autosegmental representation of segment features. Notice that in the standard generative phonology, these features are bundles arranged, organized one after the other. In the feature geometry theory, they are represented at different levels and are related to each other, associated to each other. This way of representing sounds provides an insightful explanation of phenomena such as assimilation, among others. Now, that's about the extension of the autosegmental phonological framework to other phonological phenomena. There are issues that remain. For example, what happens to these autosegments when a speaker comes to pronounce utterances? Does the multilinearity stay, or there is some crucial change in this? Now, so the autosegmental phonological theory has to address that question. The theory has come to propose that there is a phenomenon such as conflation, tier conflation. So all these various multiple tiers come to be conflated at a single tier. That is how the utterances, when they are produced in the dimension of time, the unidimension of time, one after another. But their explication, the accounting for them, has to take into account the multilinearity of the organization or representation of these phenomena. We will look at the autosegmental phonological analysis of phenomena such as tone and assimilation in the ensuing modules, in the following modules. And let's hope you'll be able to do the exercises on autosegmental phonology in this module and be ready for an in-depth study of the other autosegmental phenomena. Thank you.